Hi, I've joined forces with Nancy's Notions to bring you the latest trends in DIY sewing. I'm Beverly Johnson, but I'm known as the Fairy Bra Mother. I've been sewing intimate apparel for over 25 years. Together with Nancy's Notions, I've written a book called Sew Simple Bralettes. Join me and we'll explore the latest in bra fashion, the bralette. Together we can make bralettes worthy of your top drawer. So when you're sewing bralettes, you're going to use knit fabrics in pretty much 100% of the time. You can use lace fabrics like stretch lace fabrics. You can use stretch fabrics such as the bare knits that Nancy's Notions carries. You can use cotton jersey. You can use wickable. It all requires about 1/3 of a yard. You could even use bamboo or polycotton, spandex, anything like that. You can use stretch lace edging, such as this, and you need about 1.5 to 2 yards of lace wide enough for the pattern pieces, but you can see that this is a stretch lace, and that's what you need. If you're going to use a foam lining, which you can, that's an option in the book. Here's the foam lining. It's also called cut and sew foam, but it is a lightweight foam lining that provides support and coverage. If you're going to use foam lining, you will also need a stretch fabric cover to go over it because you won't want just this plain foam lining on the outside. You can also use some of these space-dyed fabrics such as this one, or you could use a sheer fabric like this one. This is called sheer cup lining. So if you really want a sexier sort of look or a cool look, then you can use this type of sheer fabric. The needles that you'll use when working with stretch knits generally would be a stretch 75 or a ballpoint 70 or 80. Those will all work. And the ballpoint tip or the stretch needle tip is blunter so that it travels through the fibers of the knit rather than catching on them. The thread, regular polyester thread, is advised, such as the Madeira thread. There's lots of good thread brands out there. Just don't use 3 for $1 thread. That's not good quality. Now, if you have trouble sewing knits, I've got some tips, tricks, and techniques for sewing on knits. First of all, you're going to use both straight and zigzag stitches. So the straight stitch is like any other seam. You're going to put the fabrics together with right sides together, but when you sew it, you're going to pull the fabric ever so slightly as you sew. You're not going to really pull on it, but you're just going to pull very slightly. And I say that's to show the fabric who's boss. So that's what you're going to do to sew on a stretch fabric. You're going to also use zigzag stitches, and depending on the technique that you're doing, you might use a zigzag of about a 2 or 2.5 wide to 2.5 long. And that will be for sewing elastics on, for example, because you need to sew elastic with a zigzag stitch. If you're sewing fold over binding, which is the trim on the neckline and the top edges of the bralette, you're going to use a smaller zigzag, such as a 1.5 or 2 width and 1.5 or 2 length. If you're sewing on the foam lining, then you're going to use a wider zigzag, perhaps 3 to 3.5 wide and 2 to 2.5 long. And I know that sounds confusing now. You don't have to remember anything. It's all in the book. If you suffer from skipped stitches, and I know that's a problem when people sew with knits, it's almost always going to be that it's incorrect needle or thread. So it could be that you have the wrong type of needle, i.e. you have a universal instead of a ballpoint or stretch, or that it's like a size 14 instead of being a size 8 or 10 size, because you really need fine needles for working with stretch knits. If it's a thread issue, it could be that you've got a thread that's mismatched in the top or the bobbin. You should always match whatever thread you have in the top, should always have your bobbin match to that thread. It could also be that your bobbin is wound too loose or the machine is not threaded correctly. That's about all the problems that you will have with skip stitches. Honestly, sewing with knits is not that difficult, and I'm hoping that you'll give it a try. When it comes to elastic, there are 3 different methods I'm going to show you in the book to sew on elastic. The first is what we call flat elastic or flat sewing elastic, and we're just going to take elastic like we show here on the back, and we're just going to sew the elastic directly to the lace, for example, behind the scalloped edge of the lace, and it's just zigzagged on. It's no big deal, and it's easy and it's fast. So that's what we call flat sewing elastic. The second method is when we actually turn the edge, and I'm just going to flip this over so you can see. The flat sewing elastic is here, but up here we had a cut edge, and so we have to turn the elastic over. So we're actually going to do this elastic in 2 steps. Don't worry, I explain how this is done in the book. The third method of sewing elastic is the fold over elastic. Fold over is a about 5/8 or 3/4 wide elastic, but it has a line in the middle right here that makes it easier to fold in half in order to sew it on the garment, as we see here. And we're going to sew the fold over. We're going to actually zigzag it onto the edge. But here's a little tip you might not know about fold over. Fold over is shiny on one side and matte on the other. And most fold overs, it's up to you to choose which side you want to work with. Now, I have a tendency to work with the matte. I just happen to like it better, but that is totally up to you. So, as I say, 3 methods of sewing elastic. I talk about them all in the book. I'm Beverly Johnson, and I hope together we can make a bralette.